You never expect your badge to become meaningless because of the color of your skin. But sometimes the uniform you trust to protect you turns into a weapon used against you. For Special Agent Diane Carter, that moment came on a sunny Tuesday on Interstate 85 south of Atlanta. The sky was clear and warm. It was midday. The dashboard camera didn't flicker. It simply recorded the moment a career ended, and a city's treasury suffered a $2.1 million loss. Diane had been driving for 3 hours, returning from a 10-month undercover mission in Charlotte that had successfully dismantled a major drug trafficking ring. She wasn't wearing a suit or tactical vest. She was dressed in a simple gray hooded sweatshirt, jeans, and sneakers. She looked exactly as she was, a tired woman trying to get home to her family. She was driving her personal vehicle, a metallic charcoal Dodge Charger, a powerful machine that was her only luxury, rarely driven fast. Today, the cruise control was set to 70 miles per hour. She knew the statistics better than anyone. As a black woman in America, regardless of the federal badge in her glove compartment, the numbers were stacked against her. She always started life at a disadvantage. The data showed that black drivers were significantly more likely to be stopped than white drivers, and when stopped, they were much more likely to be searched. Diane didn't want to be a statistic. She just wanted to go home. She was exhausted after a long shift. She checked her rearview mirror. A car was approaching rapidly from behind, aggressively tailgating her. Diane stayed in the right lane. The car drew closer. She tapped the brakes, a polite signal to back off. The response came immediately. The blinding projector lights from the police light bar illuminated her rear window. The siren blared once, a mechanical demand for compliance. "Here we go," Diane muttered, her fatigue instantly replaced by a cold, familiar tension. Diana found herself in a situation she really didn't want to be in. She had to stop. She had to not respond in any way. She signaled, slowly reduced her speed, and pulled over to the side of the road. She turned off the engine, rolled down all 4 windows to show she had nothing to hide, and placed both hands on the steering wheel with her fingers spread. She did everything right. In the side mirror, she saw the police officer approaching. He was large and had a swagger about him, as if he were looking for a confrontation rather than conducting a routine check. His hand was already reaching for his gun. Diana knew what could happen to her, so she didn't make any sudden movements. This was Deputy Sheriff Clayton Riggs. He had been working at the Pinewood County Sheriff's Office for 6 years. He had 4 complaints of excessive use of force on his record, all of which had been dismissed by Internal Affairs. He believed that fear was the only currency that mattered. Today he saw a nice car, a black driver, and out-of-state license plates. In Riggs's mind, the possible reason was already written. All the requirements for him to be harsh with Diana were there. "License and registration," Riggs shouted. He didn't say hello. He didn't explain the reason for the stop. He stood behind the door pillar, the light from his flashlight shining directly into Diane's eyes, blinding her despite the afternoon sun. "Good afternoon, officer," Diane said calmly, adjusting her tone to reduce the tension. "My license is in my back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'll reach with my right hand and get them. Is that okay?" she asked. Riggs didn't like that tone of voice. It wasn't a fearful tone of voice, it was a professional tone of voice. For a bully, professionalism seemed like arrogance. "I didn't ask for an explanation," Riggs snapped. "I said get your ID, now." "I'm informing you of my movements for your safety and mine," Diane replied, moving slowly. "I also need to inform you that I am a federal law enforcement officer. My badge and ID are in the glove compartment, next to my license. My service weapon is safely stored in the trunk," she said. Diana conveyed all the necessary information, but Riggs couldn't care less. He just wanted to bully and belittle Diana. The silence lasted 3 seconds but felt like an hour. Riggs shifted his weight. A smarter cop would pause, would want to see her credentials first. But Riggs wasn't smart. He was eager to make an arrest. "Federal agent?" Riggs asked sarcastically, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Yes, I'm also an FBI director. Keep your hands on the wheel," he said. "Officer, if you check the glove compartment," Diana tried to continue. "I said keep your hands on the wheel," Riggs yelled, opening the holster strap on his gun with his hand. "You think I haven't heard that before? Get out of the car," he said. Diane gripped the steering wheel tighter. She knew exactly what was happening. She had been profiled. She took a deep breath. She knew exactly how to deal with him. "Officer, I'm complying with your order. To avoid any misunderstanding, I'm informing you of my status. I am FBI Special Agent Diane Carter." She tried again. Diane didn't want the situation to escalate. She just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and go to sleep. "Get out." "Now," Riggs yelled. Riggs pulled on the door handle. It was locked. He banged his flashlight on the window. The sound echoed on the empty highway. "Open the door, or I'll break the window and drag you out," he ordered. Diane unlocked the door. The moment the lock opened, Riggs threw the door open. He didn't wait for her to unbuckle her seatbelt. He reached out, grabbed the front of her hoodie, and pulled her out of the seat. Diane stumbled onto the gravel bed. She was 5'9", a trained field agent who knew defensive tactics and had taken down dangerous criminals twice her size. She could have neutralized Riggs in seconds. She could have broken his wrist before he even knew what was happening. But Diane was trying to stay calm despite everything. She surrendered. She knew that if she resisted, even in self-defense, she would die. The headline wouldn't read FBI agent defends herself. It would read suspect shot while trying to grab cop's gun. Turn around, put your hands on the car, Riggs yelled, pushing Diana against the hot metal of the Charger. I'm doing what you say, Diana said, pressing her cheek against the paint. My ID is in the glove compartment. Please check my ID, she added. Shut up, Riggs said. He was actually about to make the mistake of his life. But he had chosen not to believe her because of her skin color. However, the truth was about to come out. Have you ever been subjected to the same treatment as Diana? Riggs kicked Diane's legs and spread them wide. He searched her aggressively, looking for contraband that wasn't there. He found her wallet in her back pocket, took it out, and threw it on the hood without looking. You smell like marijuana, Riggs lied. It was one of the oldest tricks in the book, an all-encompassing excuse to conduct a search. I'm searching the car, he said. I won't let you search me, Diane said plainly. And I don't smell like weed. I'm a federal agent. You're making a mistake, officer, she warned Riggs once more, because her patience was wearing thin. Riggs spun Diane around, grabbed her wrist, and twisted her back with unnecessary force. The pain radiated to her shoulder. If you resist me, I'll knock you to the ground, Riggs whispered in her ear. Did you hear me? He asked. Stop resisting, he said. I'm not resisting, Diane said, gritting her teeth. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly tense. Cold steel handcuffs bit into Diane's wrists. Riggs tightened the handcuffs until they cut off her circulation. Then he double-locked them. He pushed Diane into the back of the patrol car. You're going for a ride, impersonating a police officer, resisting arrest. I'll write down everything I can think of, he said. There was no turning back now. As Diane was pushed into the back seat, she looked directly at the camera on the patrol car's dashboard. She made eye contact with the lens. She wanted the jury to see her face. She wanted them to see the quiet anger in the eyes of the internal affairs investigators. The interior of the patrol car was cramped and smelled stale, of sweat and vinyl. Diane sat strangely, her hands numb behind her back. Through the grill, she watched Deputy Riggs return to his Charger. This was the turning point. This was the moment when the mistake turned into a catastrophe that ended his career. Riggs leaned into the Charger and began rummaging through the belongings. He opened the glove compartment. What they found there was shocking. A black leather ID case. It had FBI written on it in gold letters. Inside was a gold badge and an ID card with Diane's photo, clearly showing his rank, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Riggs froze. He stared at the IDs for a full 10 seconds. Then he returned to the patrol car where Diane was watching him from the rear window. His face drained. His confidence evaporated. Holding the ID card in his hand, he dropped it once, then managed to put it back in its case. No longer an aggressive bully, but a man who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake, he slowly walked back to the patrol car. He opened the back door. Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he stammered. He had suddenly turned from that wild man into a kitten, because he too was aware of his mistake. He knew very well what was coming. Diane's voice was ice cold. There's no misunderstanding, officer. You behaved in a racist manner toward me. You refused to listen when I told you my ID. You assaulted a federal agent. You violated the rights granted to me by the Fourth Amendment. And you did all of this on camera, she replied authoritatively. Diane had no intention of backing down. Riggs' hands trembled as he unlocked the handcuffs. I was just doing my job. You fit the description, he said. What description? Diane interrupted, rubbing her wrists where the handcuffs had cut into her skin. A black woman driving a nice car? That's not a description, officer. That's racism, she replied. I'm sorry, I didn't know, said Riggs. You didn't know because you didn't check. You saw my skin color and made assumptions. That's profiling. It's illegal. And now you're going to face the consequences, said Diane. Riggs stepped back and allowed Diane to exit the vehicle. Diane stopped at the side of the road, adjusted her hoodie, her whole body radiating controlled anger. Officer Riggs, she said formally, pulling out her phone. I'm calling my field office. They'll be in touch with your supervisor within an hour. I'm also filing a formal complaint with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. You'll want to call your union representative, she said. Riggs' face turned gray with pallor. Please, Agent Carter. I have a family. I made a mistake, he said. You made a choice, Diane corrected him. You chose to abuse your authority. "Now you will face justice," she replied. Diane drove away, her hands still shaking from adrenaline, while Riggs stood alone by the roadside, staring at the dash cam that had recorded everything. He didn't know it yet, but his career was over. A lawsuit would be filed, a criminal case would be filed, and the $2.1 million in damages was just the beginning of what this traffic stop would cost. 2 hours after Diane called her field office, the federal justice system sprang into action. The FBI in Atlanta sent 2 agents to the Pinewood County Sheriff's Office to seize the dashboard camera footage. The sheriff, Thomas Holloway, a career politician, tried to downplay the incident. "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding," Holloway said, sitting across from the federal agents in his office. Deputy Riggs is a decorated officer. He was probably just being cautious, he said. The FBI's lead agent, Marcus Webb, a 20-year veteran, didn't bat an eye. The sheriff, your deputy, handcuffed a federal agent during a traffic stop, despite the agent clearly identifying himself. He conducted an illegal search. He used excessive force. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a civil rights violation," he said. "1 minute, we are seizing the dashcam footage under federal authority," Webb cut him off. "And you should know that Agent Carter has filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice. Your department is under investigation." Holloway's face flushed. "Just coming in here like this, yes we can. And we did." Webb stood up. "You have 24 hours to preserve all records pertaining to Deputy Riggs. Any tampering with evidence will result in federal obstruction charges. Is that clear?" The sheriff had no choice but to comply. Meanwhile, Diane sat in the Atlanta FBI field office, giving a detailed statement to the Office of Professional Responsibility. Her wrists were bruised and swollen where the handcuffs had cut into her skin. A forensic expert photographed the injuries. "Agent Carter," the OPR inspector said gently, "I have to ask, why didn't you resist? You've had defensive tactics training. You could have incapacitated him." Diane's answer was simple and devastating. "Because I knew that if I raised my hand to defend myself, I would die. He would shoot me and claim I resisted. I had to let him attack me in order to stay alive and tell the truth." The inspector wrote this down and underlined it twice. The video hit the news 3 days later. A local reporter named Sarah Jenkins had a source within the sheriff's department who leaked the footage. Within hours, the video was everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, social media platforms were ablaze with outrage. The video showed everything: Riggs violently pulling Diane out of her car, Diane's calm, professional demeanor, repeatedly stating she was a federal agent, Riggs ignoring her, ruthlessly handcuffing her, throwing her into the back of the police car. Then the moment Riggs discovered her identity, his face turning pale, starting to panic. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Civil rights organizations demanded Riggs's arrest. The FBI Agents Association issued a statement condemning the incident. Even police reform advocates, who often criticize federal law enforcement, rallied behind Diane. Sheriff Holloway attempted damage control by holding a press conference claiming Riggs had followed proper procedure. The public didn't buy it. Protests erupted outside the Pinewood County Courthouse. National media descended on the small Georgia town. Diane filed a federal lawsuit 3 weeks later. The complaint was devastating in its details: violation of Fourth Amendment rights, excessive use of force, unlawful arrest, racial profiling. She sued Riggs personally and the sheriff's office for failing to properly train and supervise his deputies. The lawsuit sought $5 million in damages. The county's insurance lawyers reviewed the video and evidence and immediately recommended a settlement. They knew they couldn't win in court. The jury would watch that video and award Diane everything she asked for. However, the county refused to settle quickly and tried to force Diane to accept a lower amount. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. Diane was no ordinary plaintiff. She was a federal agent with the full resources of the FBI behind her, and she was prepared to pursue this case to the end. The criminal case moved more quickly. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division filed federal charges against Riggs: abuse of authority, tampering with records. His report had labeled Diane aggressive, and obstruction of justice. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution presented dashcam footage, Diane's testimony, and expert witnesses on the use of force and constitutional law. When Diane took the witness stand, the courtroom was packed. She wore her FBI badge around her neck on a lanyard, making her status clear. The prosecutor asked, "Agent Carter, why didn't you show your badge immediately when Riggs first approached your vehicle?" Diane's answer was calm and clear. "I tried to tell him verbally that I was a federal agent and that my badge was in the glove compartment. He wouldn't let me get my badge. He escalated the situation without me being able to physically prove my identity." "What were you thinking when you were handcuffed and put in the patrol car?" Diane looked directly at Riggs, who sat at the defense table and appeared smaller than he had at the side of the highway. "I was thinking of all the other black people in the same situation, people who aren't federal agents, people who don't have the resources or platforms to fight back. I was thinking about how many times Riggs had done this before and gotten away with it. The defense tried to argue that Riggs was following protocol, acting cautiously, and that his mistake was sincere. But the video had undermined all their arguments. The jury could see and hear everything. Deliberation lasted 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing took place. The federal judge, a stern woman named Margaret Chen, looked at Riggs with obvious disgust. "Mr. Riggs," Judge Chen began, "you were given the authority to protect and serve. Instead, because of your own prejudices and ego, you used that authority as a weapon against a citizen, and a federal agent at that. You have undermined the public's trust in law enforcement. You have damaged the reputation of all the good officers who do this job with integrity." He paused to let his words sink in. The sentencing guidelines call for 8 to 12 years in prison. However, due to the seriousness of this civil rights violation and your lack of remorse, I am sentencing you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Riggs's face fell. His lawyer had told him he would get 5 years. 15 years was a devastating sentence. He would be 60 when he got out. As the marshals led Riggs away in handcuffs, the same ones he had put on Diane, he looked at her once. Diane's expression was neutral. There was no satisfaction, no triumph. Just the calm resolve of someone who had seen justice finally prevail. The lawsuit was settled 2 months later. Faced with a case they couldn't win, and mounting legal costs, the county agreed to pay Diane $2.1 million. The settlement also required the sheriff's office to implement sweeping reforms, mandatory body cameras, bias training, new hiring practices, and independent oversight. Instead of facing the reforms, Sheriff Holloway retired. Riggs's entire unit was disbanded. The network of old friends that had protected officers like Riggs for decades was finally broken. 6 months after the settlement, Diane sat on her back porch, watching her 7-year-old daughter Maya play in the yard. The physical marks on her wrists had faded, becoming thin, almost invisible white lines. The emotional scars took longer to heal. The phone rang. It was a message from Sarah Jenkins, the reporter who had leaked the video. Riggs was taken into protective custody after the prison incident. "I thought you should know." Diane didn't click on the link for details. She didn't need to know. She knew prison was hell for old cops. Riggs would spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and live with the consequences of his choices. She put down her phone and looked at her daughter. "Mommy, come push me on the swing." Diane stood up and walked toward the sunlight, leaving her phone and her past behind. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a mother, a wife, and an agent who refused to stay silent and was changing a broken system. The Pinewood County Sheriff's Office was unrecognizable now. New leadership. New policies. Every officer wore a body camera, footage automatically uploaded to independent servers. Younger, more diverse officers actually lived in the communities they served. The next time a black driver was pulled over on Interstate 85 in Pinewood County, the officers behind them would think twice. They would remember the video. They would remember the $2.1 million. They would remember Agent Diane Carter, who turned a moment of injustice into systemic change. 3 years later, Diane spoke at a law enforcement conference about accountability and reform. The audience included police chiefs, federal agents, and civil rights advocates. "People ask me if I'm angry about what happened," Diane said. "I was angry. I still am. But anger without action is just noise. I channeled that anger into demanding accountability, pushing for change, taking action so that no one else would have to go through what I did." A young officer raised his hand. "What advice would you give to officers who want to do better?" Diane smiled. "Remember that your badge is not a weapon, it's a responsibility. Remember that everyone you encounter is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's sister. Treat them accordingly. And if you see another officer cross the line, speak up. Your silence makes you an accomplice." After the speech, dozens of officers approached her. Some apologized on behalf of the profession. Some thanked her for her courage. Others described abuses they had witnessed, and the dilemma they faced about whether to report them. A young black officer pulled Diane aside. "Agent Carter, I became a police officer because of you. Because you proved the system could change. Thank you." Diane's eyes welled up. "Don't thank me. Be the officer I needed on that highway that day. Be part of the change." That evening on her way home, Diane passed the exact spot on Interstate 85 where Riggs had stopped her. The shoulder now looked different, like a regular highway lane. But Diane would never forget what happened there. The fear, the humiliation, the handcuffs cutting into her wrists. The moment she realized her badge meant nothing to a man who only saw her skin color. She wouldn't forget what came after either. The investigation, the trial, the settlement, the reforms. How a terrible moment sparked meaningful change. Riggs was serving the 3rd year of his 15-year sentence. The county was still paying its settlement debt. Diane was still doing her job, making sure the badge meant protection, not oppression. Sometimes justice is delayed, sometimes it is denied. But if you have the courage to remain patient even when everything inside you wants to fight, if you have the discipline to allow the system to work even if it has disappointed you before, if you have the strength to turn pain into purpose, justice can be achieved. Deputy Sheriff Clayton Riggs thought he was the law, yet he learned he was a man who had abused his authority and would spend the next 12 years in prison, filled with regret. Agent Diane Carter thought she was just trying to go home. She became the catalyst for reforms that would protect thousands of drivers who came after her. The dashboard camera didn't flicker. It simply recorded the truth, and in the end, the truth prevailed.